My name is Paige Afton, and 3 days ago I sat across from a lawyer, read a single document, and realized my entire family had been living a lie. The strange part was that the document wasn't supposed to help me. It was supposed to take something away. Instead, it proved that the only person who had ever truly understood me had been planning for this moment years before it happened. But to understand that, I need to take you back. I grew up in a small town outside Knoxville, Tennessee. From the outside, my family looked perfect. My father managed a local bank. My mother was deeply involved in church activities. We had a respectable reputation and a nice home. The problem was what happened behind closed doors. I was the older daughter. My younger sister, Meredith, was the favorite. Nobody ever admitted it openly, but everyone knew. When Meredith wanted piano lessons, she got them. When I wanted something, there was always a reason to wait. When she turned 16, she got a car. When I turned 16, I got a bus pass. Whenever money was tight, somehow it only affected me. My parents always had the same explanation. Meredith needs more help. Then they would smile and remind me that I was the strong one. For years, I believed that was a compliment. Later I realized it wasn't. Strong meant easy to ignore. Strong meant expected to survive without support. Strong meant nobody felt guilty about putting me second. So I learned to depend on myself. I worked during high school, paid many of my own expenses, and focused on building a future. Eventually, I became the first person in my family to graduate college. I thought that achievement would finally make my parents proud. Instead, they missed my graduation. The reason? Meredith was moving into a new apartment and needed help with furniture. Apparently, that mattered more. I remember sitting alone after the ceremony, watching families celebrate while I balanced my phone on a bench to take my own graduation photos. That afternoon, my grandfather Howard called. He was the only person in the family who ever made me feel important. He congratulated me and told me how proud he was. Then he said something strange. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I already took care of it." At the time, I assumed he meant a graduation gift. I had no idea those words would eventually change my life. A few years after graduation, life finally started moving in a better direction. I found a stable job in accounting and slowly built a career for myself. For the first time, I wasn't focused on proving anything to my parents. I was simply trying to build a life I could be proud of. That's when I met Daniel Reeves. Daniel wasn't wealthy. He wasn't flashy. He owned a small electrical business and spent most of his days working with his hands. What attracted me to him wasn't his career. It was his character. He was honest, hardworking, and kind. He treated people with respect regardless of their job title or bank account. After spending most of my life around people who cared too much about appearances, that felt refreshing. Our relationship grew quickly. Daniel listened when I spoke. He remembered small details. He showed up when he said he would. Eventually, we got married. It wasn't a huge wedding. It wasn't extravagant. But it was perfect for us. The only person missing was Grandpa Howard. He had passed away before the wedding, and his absence left a hole that never completely healed. My parents attended the ceremony, but only briefly. They acted like guests at a stranger's event instead of parents celebrating their daughter's marriage. A week later, we attended a family dinner. That was the night my father made his opinion of Daniel painfully clear. The family was gathered around the dining table when Dad suddenly looked across at Daniel. "I expected more from Paige," he said. The room immediately became uncomfortable. Daniel looked confused. "What do you mean?" Dad shrugged casually. "I thought she'd marry someone more ambitious." Nobody spoke. My mother stared at her plate. Meredith pretended not to hear. And just like that, everyone allowed the insult to sit there. Daniel stayed calm. But on the drive home, he said something I never forgot. "I don't need your father to respect me." I looked at him. "He should respect you." That sentence stayed with me for a long time because deep down, I already knew the truth. My father didn't respect me. At least not enough. Still, I kept trying. I kept hoping things would improve. Then Christmas arrived. And everything finally fell apart. My parents hosted a large family gathering that year. The house was packed with relatives. Music played in the background. People laughed, talked, and exchanged gifts. At some point, Meredith pulled me aside. The moment she closed the kitchen door, I knew she wanted something. She always did. "I need a favor," she said. I crossed my arms. "What kind of favor?" She took a deep breath. "I need $5,000. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. Over the years, Meredith had borrowed thousands of dollars from various family members. Very little of it was ever repaid. This time she claimed she needed money to launch a boutique business. A fresh start. A big opportunity. A dream she couldn't afford without help. Normally, I would have found some way to say yes. But something had changed. I was tired. Tired of being the backup plan. Tired of being treated like an emergency fund. Tired of watching everyone sacrifice for Meredith while nobody sacrificed for me. So for the first time in my life, I said no. Politely. Firmly. No. The reaction was immediate. Within minutes, Meredith walked back into the living room crying. Dad rushed over. "What happened?" Meredith wiped her eyes dramatically. "Paige won't help me." Suddenly, every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward me. Then my father stood up and delivered the sentence that changed everything. "What kind of sister refuses to help family?" The room fell completely silent. And at that moment, I realized the worst part wasn't what he said. It was the fact that nobody defended me. Not one person. Rumors, no contact, and the letter that changed everything. After Christmas, I expected things to cool down. Maybe someone would call. Maybe we'd talk things through. Maybe my parents would eventually realize how unfair everything had become. None of that happened. Instead, the silence grew. At first, it felt peaceful. No arguments. No guilt trips. No requests for money. No being compared to Meredith. For the first time in years, my life felt calm. Then the rumors started. I didn't hear them immediately. I discovered them a few months later when my cousin Rachel called. She sounded nervous. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." There was a long pause. Then she lowered her voice. "Are you okay?" The question confused me. "Of course." Rachel hesitated. "Your mom told everyone you've been struggling emotionally." I sat up straight. "What?" She sighed. "She says you've changed. That you've been acting unstable." For a moment, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Unstable? The word hit me like a punch. I had a good job. A healthy marriage. A peaceful life. But somehow, in my parents' version of events, I had become the problem. And it got worse. According to the rumors, Daniel was controlling me. He had isolated me from the family. I was angry for no reason. I had abandoned everyone. The more Rachel talked, the more I realized something. My parents weren't telling people what happened. They were rewriting the story. And in their version, they were the victims. One by one, people started disappearing from my life. Relatives stopped texting. Friends stopped calling. Holiday messages vanished. Birthday greetings stopped. Most people never asked for my side of the story. They simply accepted whatever they were told. Only Rachel remained in contact. Everyone else chose convenience over truth. Eventually, Daniel and I moved about 45 minutes away. Not far enough to disappear. Just far enough to breathe. The move changed everything. I received a promotion at work. Daniel's business continued growing. We bought a small house with a porch and a backyard. For the first time in my life, home felt peaceful. Still, there were moments when the silence hurt. Every Christmas I looked at my phone. Every birthday I wondered if someone might reach out. Nobody ever did. 2 full years passed. Then one Tuesday morning, a letter arrived. The moment I saw the law firm's return address, my stomach dropped. Something felt wrong. I carried the envelope inside and placed it on the kitchen counter. For 2 days, I couldn't bring myself to open it. When you've cut ties with family, unexpected legal mail has a way of making your imagination run wild. By Thursday morning, curiosity finally won. I opened the envelope. The letter was short. Cold. Professional. My father intended to sell Grandpa Howard's lake house. Because I might have a potential claim to the property, they wanted me to sign paperwork giving up any rights. That was it. No apology. No explanation. No attempt to reconnect. After 2 years of silence, the first contact from my family was a legal document. I stared at the paperwork for several minutes. Then my eyes landed on something sitting on a shelf in the kitchen. Grandpa Howard's old tackle box. Inside it was an envelope I had carried with me for years. An envelope I had never opened. The front contained 4 handwritten words. For Paige. When you need it. I found it shortly after Grandpa's funeral. For some reason, I had always saved it. Now, something told me it was time. I opened the tackle box. Carefully removed the envelope. And broke the seal. Inside were 2 things. A handwritten letter. And a set of legal documents. The moment I started reading, my heart began racing. Because those papers revealed a secret that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. A secret Grandpa Howard had protected for years. And a secret my father never saw coming. The trust, the truth, and the meeting that changed everything. For several minutes, I sat on the floor reading the documents over and over again. I honestly thought I had misunderstood something. But every time I checked, the answer remained the same. Years before his death, Grandpa Howard had placed the lake house into an irrevocable trust. And according to the paperwork, I was the sole beneficiary. Not my father. Not Meredith. Me. My hands were shaking when I finally opened Grandpa Howard's letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. The moment I saw it, tears filled my eyes. The letter wasn't long. But every sentence felt personal. Grandpa explained that he had watched our family for years. He saw the favoritism. He saw how often my needs came second. And he understood something nobody wanted to admit. My father would always put Meredith first. No matter the cost. The final paragraph hit me the hardest. This house belongs to you, Paige. It's always been yours. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I sat there crying. Not because of the property. Because someone had finally seen the truth. Someone had understood. For the first time in my life, I felt completely validated. When Daniel came home that evening, I handed him the documents. He read them quietly. Then looked up and smiled. Your grandfather knew exactly what he was doing. The next morning, I called the attorney listed on the trust paperwork. His name was Michael Calloway. The moment I explained who I was, his tone changed. He clearly remembered Grandpa Howard. After reviewing the documents, he confirmed what I already suspected. The trust was legitimate. The lake house belonged to the trust. And legally, my father had absolutely no ownership rights. Then he said something interesting. If someone is trying to sell that property, we may have a serious problem. Suddenly, this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a legal issue. A few days later, Rachel called again. This time she sounded even more nervous. There's something you should know. I listened carefully. And finally, the entire story came out. Meredith's boutique business was failing. Badly. My father had spent years helping her stay afloat. He had co-signed loans, taken on debt, refinanced assets. And according to Rachel, the financial situation had become desperate. The total debt was approaching $180,000. I couldn't believe it. Everything suddenly made sense. The lake house sale had never been about practical decisions. It wasn't about maintenance. It wasn't about honoring Grandpa's wishes. It was about money. The sale was supposed to rescue Meredith one more time. And my father was counting on it. Rachel hesitated before saying one last thing. He keeps telling everyone you're going to sign. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. After everything that had happened, my father still believed I'd give in. Still believed I'd sacrifice for the family. Just like I always had. A few days later, I drove back to town for a meeting with the attorney handling the sale. I expected a simple legal discussion. Instead, the moment I walked into the conference room, I stopped cold. My father was sitting there. Waiting. He looked exactly the same. Perfect shirt. Perfect posture. Perfect confidence. As if nothing had changed. "Hello, Paige," he said. I sat down across from him. The attorney placed the paperwork on the table. Dad immediately started talking. The house wasn't being used. The family needed help. Grandpa would have wanted everyone taken care of. The same arguments. The same pressure. Then he pushed the paperwork toward me. "Let's make this easy." I looked at him. "This is the first contact we've had in 2 years." He stayed silent. "You haven't asked how I'm doing." More silence. Then he sighed. "I'm not here to discuss the past." Of course he wasn't. Because discussing the past meant discussing the truth. When I asked what would happen if I refused to sign, his expression changed. Then things become complicated. The same line he had used my entire life whenever someone disagreed with him. Then, unbelievably, he started telling the attorney that I had emotional problems. That Daniel was controlling. That I had become difficult. The exact same lies he had been spreading for years. I felt something inside me go completely calm. For the first time, I wasn't angry. Because this time, I had proof. And in just a few minutes, everything he believed about that lake house was about to collapse. The final reveal and the lesson that changed everything. The meeting was already tense. Then everything fell apart. Right as my father finished explaining why I should sign the paperwork, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and answered without thinking. It was Meredith. The moment he picked up, her voice blasted through the room. "Did she sign yet?" My father immediately tried lowering the phone. "I'm handling it." But it was too late. Everyone had already heard. Then Meredith said something that changed everything. "Just remind her it's for the family." She always caves when you say that. The room went completely silent. My father's face turned bright red. The attorney stopped writing. I simply stared at him. For years, I had been told I was selfish. For years, I had been painted as the problem. And yet those few words revealed exactly how they viewed me. Not as a daughter. Not as family. As a resource. Someone they could pressure whenever they needed something. My father quickly ended the call. Then he looked at me. Paige, don't do this. For the first time, I noticed something different in his voice. Fear. Real fear. Slowly, I opened my folder and placed the trust documents on the table. The attorney immediately picked them up. Page after page. Signature after signature. His expression changed with every document he read. Finally, he removed his glasses and looked directly at my father. Gerald, were you aware of this trust? My father frowned. What trust? The attorney turned the papers around. The color drained from my father's face. He grabbed the documents and began reading. Then reading again. And again. His hands started shaking. This can't be right. But it was. The filing dates were valid. The trust was legal. The property had been transferred years before Grandpa Howard died. The lake house had never belonged to my father. Not for a single day. Everything he planned depended on selling a property he didn't own. A few minutes later, Attorney Calloway joined by phone and confirmed every detail. The trust was legitimate. I was the sole beneficiary. The lake house belonged to the trust. Case closed. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then my father finally broke. Without the sale, he admitted, their financial situation was far worse than anyone knew. Years of helping Meredith had nearly destroyed them. Loans. Debt. Refinancing. Missed payments. Everything had finally caught up with him. I listened quietly. Then I asked the one question I had carried my entire life. You sacrificed everything for Meredith. I looked directly at him. Did you ever stop and think about me? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because there was no answer. The silence said everything. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As I reached the door, my father called my name. I stopped. For a moment, I remembered the father I used to know. The man who taught me to ride a bike. The man who once made me laugh. The man I spent years trying to earn approval from. Then I remembered everything else. My phone number never changed, I said quietly. Then I walked away. A few days later, I learned my parents and Meredith had gone to the lake house anyway. They acted as if it still belonged to them. Photos appeared online. Family gatherings. Smiling faces. Captions about togetherness. As if the truth didn't exist. Legal notices quickly followed. And when they realized the trust was real, they finally left. That was the end of the fight. But not the end of the story. Months later, the truth became public. People started asking questions. Why had Grandpa Howard left the house to Paige? What had he seen? What did he know? Slowly, the rumors about me collapsed. Some relatives apologized. Others disappeared. I stopped worrying about either group. Because something important had changed. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's approval. Daniel and I spent the next year restoring the lake house. Fresh paint. New screens. Repairs everywhere. One afternoon, while cleaning the garage, I found an old photograph. It showed 6-year-old me standing beside Grandpa Howard on the dock. Both of us smiling. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then I finally understood something. The lake house was never the real gift. The trust wasn't the real gift. The property wasn't the real gift. The real gift was proof. Proof that someone saw me. Proof that someone understood my value. Proof that I mattered. Grandpa Howard didn't leave me a house. He left me certainty. And once you truly understand your worth, nobody can convince you that you're worth less. My name is Paige Afton. And that's how one lawyer's letter revealed a secret my family never expected me to discover. The end.